Well, on that point, we should go on to Terrence's point number 2.
Okay.
Which is that with 7 weeks to go, they still haven't sold the gimmick well enough for a general gamer. What is the Switch, a handheld or a home console? And trying to be both is really neither. Since all the power is in the tablet, it isn't really a home console. And because the tablet has no support home play, its battery life isn't good enough to be a handheld. Jack of all trades, master of none. So, yeah, this kind of links back to like the marketing on the gimmicks, and which is the gimmick? Is it the handheld or is it the Joy-Cons? I mean, I certainly think that it's all about the home console on the go or handheld in your home. I can't decide which one I side with more between those two, but I think it is kind of harsh of Terrence to sort of take this jack of all trades, master of none approach, because I know that Nintendo, if they'd made it only home console and was still less powerful than the other home consoles, that they would get absolutely lambasted for not going with their strong market, which is mobile.
It would be pointless in
handheld.
competing at that point, right? Like,
exactly.
Just exactly what we've just said is, and I know people like to say, well, if Nintendo had a console that could play all third-party games and Nintendo games, that's the only place people would go. But I don't think that's true, in the sense that people are built into, and I think I talked about this last episode, but people are built into ecosystems with PSN and with Xbox Live, and you think about the infrastructure of how important online is these days and how many light years ahead the competition are of Nintendo. That's a huge factor to take into account. Like, there's a vibrant scene for Call of Duty on PlayStation 4. That's not going to be the case on a Nintendo platform. And not only that, but, you know, just completely on a power level, they've tried it before with GameCube and it didn't work. And I just don't see a situation in which it makes any sense for them to do that. The Switch is less powerful because it is cramping everything down into this very small handheld format. And it's interesting because I saw 2 threads on NeoGAF today. One which was basically saying, is the jump from Wii U to Switch kind of a smaller jump as GameCube was to Wii? And the other one is the jump from 3DS to Switch the biggest like power jump we've ever seen in a portable? So there's kind of the glass half empty, glass half full perspective on this, which is, this is, as a successor to Wii U, maybe a little underwhelming, but as a successor to the 3DS, holy shit, is it fucking incredible, you know? So it's looking at it from both perspectives. It comes down to what you prefer to do. If you're more of a home console or handheld person, and as a handheld person, this looks incredible to me. You know, this is absolutely something that I'm very interested in. So,
and I think that when Terrence talks about haven't sold us on the gimmick, I think that first trailer, if you ignore the Japan conference, which did confuse issues that we can get into in a minute, I do believe that first trailer sold the gimmick well, and that is, essentially home console gaming on the go. And I think that just worked so well. You see the guy get up from the sofa with Zelda to take out the dog for a walk, playing Zelda on the go, and you're immediately like, wow, that is great. That is the gimmick. This is what I want the system for. And I think even through all the negativity that came from the Japanese conference, I think that is still the key message, and was probably the core message that people took away from stuff like the Switch appearing on Fallon and things. Like, I don't think that inroads have been made with the whole motion control stuff to the point where people are confused and don't understand that the core point is switching between home and on the go.
Ultimately, I just feel like Nintendo kind of shot themselves in the foot by focusing so hard on Joy-Con features and 1-2 Switch and ARMS for the first half of that conference. When you think about it, those 2 games, ARMS and 1-2 Switch, and the thing is with ARMS, you can play it with normal controls anyway, because of the idea that if you take it on the go and you just have it on that screen, you have to have normal controls to play it. You can't just be in an airplane fucking throwing your hands about, you know? So
that's why you detach the Joy-Cons, MBZ, and you can play it as you wish.
But
I mean, it gives you that option.
The person in the seat next to you. So,
yeah, just punch them. Why not?
Yeah. Well, and I think someone else has brought up the point that the only 2 games that 100% require the use of motion and Joy-Cons is Just Dance 2017 and 1-2 Switch. And in a lineup of games that features a lot of stuff that is just traditional video games, that is a tiny percentage, and yet they focus so hard on it, which really confused what people thought would be a simple message.
It's really weird. It's like there was this huge market exposed by the Wii, and they just could not resist dipping back into that market, or attempting to dip back into that market. It was that first reveal of the Switch with the 3-minute trailer, with, like we just discussed, with him going for the walk with his dog with Zelda. Like, that was so far from motion controls that it was just so weird to see them hammering on with motion controls so much. And I don't know, I can see why they did it, and I'm only scared that there are features that they spent money on in the Switch that no one will make games for in a couple of years' time, when we're talking about HD Rumble and all these things. Like, I'm concerned that 1-2 Switch and ARMS, for example, and maybe, who knows, just Dance, or like, they become the only 3 games that ever use this extra functionality that has resulted in the system costing a bit more to produce. And that'd be a real shame if in the long run that harms Nintendo in some way, and that the final product price is higher as a result. And I think that it's really interesting to see if stuff like 1-2 Switch, as much as it's been branded badly, advertised badly, I should say, and that it's not bundled, and that it is on its own, and that it is over expensive, just to see if people do actually pick up that game and actually think, you know what, this is actually really cool, but I am only happy with it for perhaps half an hour versus a few hours, or more than a few hours, with something like Wii Sports. So I am intrigued to see how that game does and what people say about it.
I think that Nintendo not including it as a bundled game has to some degree killed the virality or potential virality of it, because ultimately the people who first bought Wiis were hardcore gamers who took them home for Christmas, who had grandma play Wii Sports and fell in love with it, and then they wanted one, you know? And if hardcore gamer goes back for Christmas and is just sitting on his own playing Zelda because he didn't want to pay for 1-2 Switch, then guess what? No one's going to know that 1-2 Switch exists, and no one's going to care about it. So they really gimped themselves by not doing that. Like, it seems so obvious that they could, like, throw this out there and make it seem like something that potential, you know, casual consumers would want to pick up the system for, but now they don't have that option.
It's really confusing on top of that by the fact that they to call it a skew is maybe an overstatement. They have 2 different colors. They've got the grey,
right,
and they've got the blue and the pink, red, whatever you want to call it. Neon reddish pink. And essentially 1-2 Switch is branded on this blue and red, and then they release a system that is blue and red, and then the two don't come together. And apparently even in game at 1-2 Switch, they talk about the blue player and the red player in these 2-player games. You know,
really?
That's what Jose Otero was mentioning on Nintendo Voice Chat. I don't know if you remember. So he was suggesting that in game it tells you, oh, the blue player does this and the red player does that, and so with each Joy-Con, and to then have a system of those colors, and you think, why not bundle it in some way? Just do 2 SKUs. One's the grey one that doesn't come with 1-2 Switch, and one's the color one that does. I don't know. Like, it was just really. I mean, I am really intrigued by this game, and I do want to pick it up in 2017, but I'm not going to pick it up on launch. I'd rather pick it up on the cheap, and it's a bit of a shame, because I think that game does a lot of cool things, and ultimately oozes Nintendo in all the great ways that Wii Sports oozed Nintendo and Wii.
It's very difficult to see a casual consumer base flocking to this system for motion gaming. I think we mentioned last podcast, those people don't find motion gaming a new weird thing anymore. They've done it. They know it's technology that exists, and they've all played Wii Sports. And so the barrier to entry with the system not only being $300, with 1-2 Switch not being a pack-in game, with the fact that it looks more complicated and uninviting than the Wii did, I just don't understand why this game was made for this system, and what, because it's really tough. Like, they want to straddle a line, but every other aspect of the system is screaming in the opposite direction. Like, no, it's $300 and it seems more complicated, and they've put all this technology into it that is supposedly cool, but is that technology going to be used outside of this thing? Like, it's a very confused message that could have just been so simple for them to be like, okay, let's not include all these features in the Joy-Cons. Let's cut the price down to as much as possible so that this can be a games machine for games. And then you get step back and you're like, well, that's not very Nintendo, is it? And you're like, well, do they need to not be very Nintendo at this point? Like, it's been 2 generations where they've been the most fucking Nintendo they could possibly be. And on one hand, it's done them very well. The other, it's been a complete failure. So it's really hard to call, you know? Like, I love that Nintendo are different and they absolutely go out there and they have these strange technologies like HD Rumble, which hike the price up, but which may prove potentially crazy and weird. Like, I haven't heard anyone talk about it, but the potential for HD Rumble in VR is actually astonishing, you know? Like, that idea of picking up an object and rattling it around, having that sensation that you're in that physical space seems like a really cool thing. And so this technology seems like it could be applicable in certain areas, but on the other hand, it's like, well, it's just jacking up the cost of a system for what, a minigame collection that doesn't even come with it, that most people aren't going to play? Like, it's just a bit of a mess. And ultimately, that's just what that presentation was. It was just a bit of a mess. If you enjoyed this discussion and would like to hear more, consider subscribing to us on YouTube and following the podcast playlist. You can also find us on iTunes and various other places. Follow us on Twitter at TNL Podcast and email us thisnintendolife@gmail.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.